Arch Advocate Podcast for Thursday, April 25th. Welcome back, everybody. Listen to me very closely. I've told you guys, I don't know, in the year and a half that I've been podcasting. Next month, it'll be a full year and a half. I started in December of 2017. And for those of you that have been with me from the very beginning, how many times have I said, it's not my position to tell you what to do. It's not the position of any man to tell any other man what to do. Or any adult to tell any other adult what to do. Right? It's just not, it's grotesque. You're a grown-ass man. You do whatever you want to do. Right? I've made that very clear. Now, that being said, listen to me. Here's what you need to do. You need to go on to Amazon.com or wherever it is that you buy your books. You need to go buy a book called Deep State Target by one George Papadopoulos. It's Greek, by the way. George Papadopoulos wrote a book called Deep State Target, and you must purchase it. That's right. Old PD, Path of Least Resistance, is telling you what to do. You need to go buy this book. And also, here's what you got to do. You need to go on to Fleckus Talks and watch the interview with George Papadopoulos. So it's an in-person, just a sit-down interview. Now, I've told you this many times before. I love Fleckus Talks. I like where the guy's at. I like what he does. I like his content, and I think you should too. And if you've heard me say that over and over again, but you never checked him out, that's cool, man. Not this time, because here's what you gotta do. This is one man telling you, another man or woman, what you got to do. And you got to go on to Fleckus Talks and watch the George Papadopoulos interview. It's 48 minutes long. What this guy is alleging, I'm going to get into it because it has the potential to change everything. And, let me get into it, because this is not going to be an easy episode. And so one last thing of what you got to do. Actually, two last things. One other thing that you got to do is you got to go on to Twitter, if you have a Twitter account, and go to George Papadopoulos' page. Let me look up. I'm sorry, man. I should have had this pulled up already. Let me pull this up for you. George Papadopoulos' Twitter is at George Papa 19. So 19. The numbers. At George Papa, like Papa John's Pizza. George Papa 19. That's his, because there's, if you type in George Papadopoulos, there's like 100 of them, right? Papadopoulos is actually a very common, it's like Smith for, Anglo-Saxon people. Papadopoulos is very common, so it's George Papa 19. You need to go onto his Twitter page, follow it, and then send him a message saying, you need to go on the Arch Advocate podcast. I'm out to him. I sent him messages on Twitter and on LinkedIn. And if you have him on LinkedIn, it's just George Papadopoulos. And hit a request, and then if he accepts, then send him a message. Say, hey, we'd love to hear from you on the Arch Advocate podcast. And I'm out to him on LinkedIn as well. I sent him a message, and at this point, all I can tell you is that he's at least seen the message, but I don't know how he feels about that. Right? I don't quite have the exposure that Fleckus does. See, the problem is with these kind of guys, it's like, you get some weirdo like me saying, hey, you want to come on my podcast? It's like, well, number one, am I going to get any exposure? Number two, are you some left-wing nut that's going to try to, get me to say something stupid? You know what I mean? Like, there's legitimate reasons to not want to do things. But if it's like Fleckus, like, you can go on to Fleckus Talks and you can watch, all of his episodes, and you can get a feel for the guy's rhythm. You can see, it's like, okay, this, you can judge intent very easily if you just watch a few of Fleckus's, right? So I want to have this guy on the show. You remember those books like was it John Grisham? John Grisham wrote The Rainmaker. Who was it that wrote The Hunt for Red October? It wasn't Grisham, was it? But there's a couple of guys that would write these really brilliant novels. Hunt for Red October, Clear and Present Danger, these kind of like spy novels, right? You watch these things, watch the movies or read the books, and you're like, oh man, what a really compelling, fable, a tale, right? Because they're stories. They're probably rooted in some sort of truth, but ultimately you're buying a novel. It's brain candy, right? You're just trying to relax and let your imagination run with intrigue and, spy stuff. It's all been intriguing, man. We've been watching like 007 our whole lives. We've been watching James Bond movies since it was Sean Connery. Some of you, not me, but some of you are old enough to remember the guy before Sean Connery. The original 007, the guy that was in On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Yeah, that wasn't Sean Connery. Those things are intriguing. And they're stories, and we can just, we can watch, James Bond movies and be like, oh, wow, that'd be really cool if any of that stuff was true. George Papadopoulos has a story of his own. And it's even more bizarre than those kind of stories. It's more detailed. It's more mind-bending. It has more, switchbacks and turnarounds. It's nuts. In another way of trying to explain it, it's crazy what he's saying. And the thing is listen, I've boasted about this a little bit before. It's very difficult to lie to me. I can spot a lie. I can, like that line from a movie, like, I can smell a lie like a fart in a car. I'm very good at that. I don't bat 1,000, but I'm awful close. All right, there's been a few people that got one over on old Petey. All right, I'm not gonna try to deceive you. I've been tricked. All right, not very often though. You got to wake up pretty early in the morning to get one over on me. I've got the super sniffer, right? My nose does not tolerate bullshit, and I can smell it a mile away. And so I was very interested in watching George Papadopoulos and listening to his voice, listening to his breathing, and I've told you before, like one of the easiest way to spot a lie is elaboration. The more elaborate the story, the easier it is to spot the BS, because when you start elaborating, right? You start coloring the story with too many different shades, then the artist starts to lose the grasp of the story, right? And so they start tripping over themselves and saying things that are incongruent, that sort of thing. Well, George Papadopoulos was on Fleckus Talks, and he's spinning a heck of a yarn. It's a heck of a story what he's telling. And not once, with all of the elaboration, not once did he trip up. But in short, I'll just put it to you this way. In my estimation, he's not lying. And I've got a very good nose for it. I've got a good nose for lying, and as far as I can tell, the man is speaking the truth. And what he is saying is that not only was there an attempted coup on a man who was running for president, and there was spying on Donald Trump before when he was running for president, and there was an attempted coup afterwards. And that the whole thing was set up just in case he won. That they would have all of, the Democrats would have all of this stuff to try to unseat a sitting leader of the free world. But that's not all of it. That's not even close. What he's alleging is that 3 other nations, at least, were involved in the process. The United Kingdom, Australia, and Italy. Now, if everything that he says is true, and everything that he says, everything that he alleges, everything that's in his book, if it's all true and it comes to light, all right? Because that's a whole different proposition, right? Like the JFK shooting, right? The assassination of John F. Kennedy. Those files are still closed. That's still top secret material. All these decades later, it's still top secret material. So the fact is we don't know what the truth is because the government is saying we can't tell you what's in here. Why? Well, because it would be embarrassing. Evidently, whatever the truth is about the John F. Kennedy assassination would be devastating to the morale of the United States. It's the only way to explain it. You know what I mean? Like, the truth is good. Everybody, we need to know the truth. And they don't want to tell us. And why? Well, we don't know. We don't know if there was a second gunman on the grassy knoll. We don't know if it was the Cubans, if it was the Russians, if it was the CIA. We don't know. We don't know because those files are still not available. Right? So, something being the truth and something being exposed are very different scenarios. But there's a number of factors. And listen, this is a tangled web. It's gonna take years. It's gonna take years. But let me explain something to you. All right. Now, for those of you who are kind of new to the show, this show actually started off as more of an economics program. We were talking about cryptocurrencies when I first started because of my experience working in the world of money for as long as I did. And I always made this point very clear. I wasn't doing the show to give you advice on which cryptocurrencies to buy. I was giving you advice on how to stay free from insanity because I had seen it before. And as I was going through it, I would always point out that there's no separation when it comes to economics and politics. They're the same thing. They are they're tied together in a way that can never be separated. Politics and economics, they're conjoined twins at the brain. They're two bodies with one brain, one epicenter. And we are about to go through if what George Papadopoulos is saying is true and it is brought to light, as in the courts. We are about to go through a very traumatic transition globally. And it's going to be very difficult. And the best, just like when I was doing talks about cryptocurrencies, the best way to ensure your own survival, to maintain your own sanity, right, your own mental health, is to adhere to the Boy Scout motto, right? You guys remember that? You put your two fingers, your index finger and your middle finger together, and you hold them up in the air, and you say, "Be prepared." That's the Boy Scout motto. Be prepared. Right? It's profound in its implications, and it is profound in its simplicity. Just be prepared. Just be ready for it. We're about to find out some things that are going to be devastating to our notion of trust in our institutions, according to one George Papadopoulos. Nations. All right, listen. If it turns out, all right, because what he's saying, let me just. So this is what's very difficult. I don't have him on the show. I would love to have him on the show because he already has the map in his mind because he lived through it. He was one of the 4 people who was targeted by a FISA court. FISA court is a fancy way of saying secret court, like the SS or the KGB. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we now have secret court. Thank you, Rudy Giuliani. I am a fan of Giuliani, by the way, but he was one of the people that helped establish the FISA court. Secret court. Secret court, where secret people go into secret judges and they say, we want a warrant to spy on George Papadopoulos. It's a big deal. It's a big deal. Getting a warrant out in the open in front of God and everybody, that's a big deal. Because it means a violation of someone's rights. Right? When a lawyer, like when a district attorney goes before a judge and says, listen, my police department that I work for, they're saying they need a warrant to spy on this dude or go into this dude's house, it's a big deal because it's in the Constitution. You're not allowed to do that except if a judge says it's okay. And so we have to be very careful about who our judges are. And we are. We were. It's a big deal. It's a billion times different when you're talking about that same thing, only minus the accountability. Having requests to deprive somebody of their constitutional rights, only this time it's in private. Right? It's a big deal. And there were FISA warrants issued in this case on the Russia collusion Donald Trump thing. In this case, there were 4 FISA warrants, and they were all based on a document that was written by Hillary Clinton. In a sense, she paid for it to be written. You see what I'm saying? Now we take one step up the crazy ladder, the clown world ladder. It's not just that a secret court issued a warrant on 4 people, one of which was George Papadopoulos, and I believe he was the first of those 4. The reason that warrant was issued was because of the work of Hillary Clinton. The Steele dossier, as they call it. Dossier. It's just a fun word to say, isn't it? Dossier. Sounds so, official. It sounds very scholarly. Dossier. Now you got a whole bunch of Young Turks fans running out there. Oh, dossier. The Steele dossier was paid for by Hillary Clinton and designed by the Democrats and taken into a secret court where evidently the judges paid no mind to what was actually in there and did not have the presence of mind to say, well, where did this information come from? Who paid for it? How did this happen? How did we get this information? Did the office of the Attorney General? Did the office of the Inspector General? Is there any sort of, was this research that was obtained by the FBI, the CIA? Where did this information come from? Nobody in secret court asked? Because the answer would have been, well, it was paid for by Hillary Clinton. Oh, okay, well then the answer is no, you can't have a warrant. Get out of here. And don't ever bring that trash back in here again. No. You see what I'm saying? You see how tangled that web is? Because that implies now, right? So we've already implied Hillary Clinton. Now it implies that the FISA court judges are in the employ of a particular political ideology. Particular political ideologues. Right? That's dangerous. And the danger has been manifested. So here's this guy, George Papadopoulos, and what he's saying. What he's alleging. I should probably put it to you that way. What he's alleging is that there is no possible way that this could have happened without the approval of the leader of the free world at the time. He's saying that Barack Hussein Obama was complicit. But it doesn't just stop there. He is saying that the government, or at least the deep state of the government of Australia, was involved. You know, you say, oh, Australia, throw another shrimp on the Barbie, drive a Subaru. Okay, listen. Yes, there's only 25 million people in Australia. But Australia is one of the top 8 nations in the world for most powerful economies. They are part of what's called the G8, the group of 8. And in the group, you know, they're one of them. So don't just slough them off like, oh, it's just, you know, g'day, mate, Crocodile Dundee. It's like, no. That's one of the most powerful nations on the planet. There's only approximately 200 nations, give or take, and depending on who you ask, but there's about 200 nations. The top 8 of those countries, well, we're number 1, and Australia is in there. Also, what George Papadopoulos is saying, or alleging, is that the British government, the government of the United Kingdom, or at least the deep state, dark actors, if you will, in the British government were also complicit in working with Barack Hussein Obama. You see what I'm saying? Like, the reason why... Forgive me if you've kind of already put this together. Let me explain something to you. Economics and politics. If what George Papadopoulos is saying is not only true, but it is brought to light and is made known, it will shake to the core. It will shake and destroy the very foundations of our foreign policy. It will destroy how we do business with the United Kingdom and with Australia. And because of that, every other nation that we do business with, Germany, all right, is part of the G8. Germany has made it very clear they do not like Donald Trump and what he represents. If these things are true, it's going to make it very clear that the governments of the United Kingdom and Australia do not like Donald Trump and do not like what he stands for. This isn't just doom and gloom. Listen, you guys might not remember, and I don't want to bore you to tears with stories and, like this sort of thing. But these things are facts, okay? When, during the 80s and the 90s, there was a thing called the Asian contagion, they called it. The nation of Japan, which is also part of the G8, the nation of Japan's economy was on its knees. They had been beaten. And the reason that they had fallen into such hard times was because they were found out. All right, Japan was doing very well. Now, Japan has an interesting culture. They like Christian culture, Japan has an honor culture, only it works in reverse. In the Christian world, our honor culture means that I need to honor you. I need to bestow upon you as much honor as I possibly can, and you need to do the same for me, right? It goes back to that do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And that's the way our honor culture works. I honor you. In various Asian communities and nations, it works the exact opposite. I need to heap onto myself as much honor as I possibly can. And it is a cultural thing. And in Japan, what had happened was they were getting so rich that at certain points, if they had any sort of weakness in their businesses, they would create another set of books, right? Like in accounting. And they would have one set of books that they would have for themselves so that they would never lose track of the truth. And then they would have another set of books that they would submit to the rest of the world, which told a very different story. It didn't expose that they had weaknesses in their company because they can't be seen as being weak, right? Because that would be dishonoring to themselves. The problem with that is that the truth always makes its way to the surface. And when it did, we found that companies like Mitsubishi and Honda and some of these other, gigantic monoliths were keeping 2 and sometimes 3 different sets of books. And when the truth came out, people lost confidence in Japan. And because of that, their equivalent of the stock market, the Nikkei, it fell all the way to earth. And it took them years and years and years to get over. It was a very long time. I made a lot of money trading the yen. Boy, I made a lot of money trading the yen. But eventually, Japan, they got their act together and they quit doing that and they realized, like, oh, okay, this is really bad. A lot of people killed themselves. A lot of Japanese businessmen committed hara-kiri because death before dishonor. I cannot be dishonored. I'd rather die before being dishonored. And they literally killed themselves. It was very traumatic. It was a very traumatic time for Japan. Right? That's what the truth does when you've been living in a lie for so long. When the truth comes out, it's devastating. It's devastating. But it's also very good. Right? Japan is fine now. They're fine. Doing great. It took a long time. Right? Well, that's how that works. You see what I'm saying? Economics and politics. Lying about your books is politics. That's politicking. You understand that? Like it's tied together. And I told you guys that story like at the same time in the late 90s. I remember this vividly, 1998. So the Nikkei was down, Japan was on their knees, and they were just, they were doing everything that they could do, and their prime minister was Sakakibara. Right, but there was all this stuff going on. Meanwhile, up in Russia, the ruble wasn't doing so great, right? Russia had only been outside of communism for, I don't know, at that point, 10 years or so, 10, 15 years. They were kind of new to capitalism, and unfortunately, like whenever... What one definite effect of communism is that the people who are willing to commit crimes and be brutal, those are the people that survive during communism. Communism incentivizes brutality because it's like somebody comes to you and says, well, the government says you can't eat today and you and your kids can't eat today. Well, the majority of people are going to say, okay, I guess I'll just starve to death then. Thank you. But there's another type of person that says, no, I'm just gonna go and I'm gonna go to the local elected official's house who's being taken care of very well by the government. I'm just gonna go and kill him and take his stuff, and then I'll be the ruler of this town. You know what I mean? It causes some men to become very brutal. And they sell drugs, and they're into prostitution, and they, if you let it grow long enough, those people end up being the people who own the oil companies and whatnot. And that's what was going on in Russia. And so Russia was having a really hard time. And America and the International Monetary Fund and these kind of things were coming together and trying to help Russia. Like, come on, dude, get with the global program, man. We're trying to make some money here. Just trade with us, man. Sell us your stuff. We'll sell you our stuff, and we're all going to get rich. It's going to be fantastic. Unfortunately, the people who were running the Russian government were all crooks, right? And so the International Monetary Fund was going to give them, like, I want to say it was like $20 billion, which was a lot of money at the time. They were going to give them a lot of money. And Smith Barney went over and they said, well, we can borrow a whole bunch of yen because it's super cheap, and we can go up and we can buy ruble with it. And when the IMF gives this money to Russia, the value of the ruble will go up. And then we'll have all this ruble and we'll sell it. And we'll pay back our loan that we borrowed from yen, and we're just going to make a ton of money. And they invested their whole book into that. Well, not their whole thing, but almost. And then the IMF did something funny. They said, hey, so remember, economics and politics, right? So the IMF goes to Russia and they said, yeah, you know what? Yeah, we've been thinking, the last few times that we gave you money, you blew it on coke and whores. Only not metaphorically this time, literally. This money, it went to Russian gangsters who like to drive fancy cars and wear gold chains and sleep with prostitutes and fly on private jets and drive, yachts and this sort of thing. Every time we've given you guys money, you guys go and produce, you're acting like you're living in a rap video. So you know what? I think we're going to take this $20 billion and instead we're going to give it to Japan, of all places. So the yen skyrocketed. At the time, it was the biggest move in the history of the currency market. It was the biggest move, and this was in August, September of 1998. It was the biggest move ever recorded in a currency move. And what Russia did, and because Russia needed money, because they, nations have debts, and debts have to be paid. And Russia owed Germany a lot of money. And so what Russia did in response to not getting that $20 billion was they just printed up a whole bunch of more ruble, put it on a cart, and shipped it off to Germany and said, here's your monthly payment. Right? The more money you print up, the less your money, the less value your money has. Right? It's a supply and demand thing. They printed up a bunch of money and devalued their own currency. They just sent off a boatload of money off to Germany, and Germany said, no, we're not taking this. It was a huge deal. And that is the story of why there is no such thing as Smith Barney anymore. Smith Barney, we make money the old-fashioned way. We blow it on speculating on the Japanese yen. Economics and politics. Because when the truth comes to light, it's devastating. When the truth about all the money that we were sending to Russia came out, that we were sending these people money and they were just blowing it. It was all going into the hands of oligarchs. And those people were also criminals, right? Drug dealers. People who would think nothing about stealing your child and selling it. Literally. That's where our money was going. That's where the IMF was sending money to. They're finally like, listen, man, the gig is up. The truth is known. We're not giving you any more money. That was the devastating effect. It devastated the Soviet Union, or whatever they call themselves these days. It's very good for Japan, though, I'll tell you that much. But the reason I just told you that very long story, and thank you for continuing to listen, is listen, if George Papadopoulos' story is A, true, and B, most importantly, comes to light in our courts. If it comes to light in our courts, or if there is a visible display of cover-ups, if anything happens to George Papadopoulos, God forbid, Father in heaven, I pray for your divine protection over the life of George Papadopoulos and his wife and each of their families. In the name of Jesus. If anything happens to George Papadopoulos or his good family, then we're all going to know. If George Papadopoulos gets Seth riched, we're all going to know. And we'll know what it means. You see, the thing is that our way of life has been challenged by the very people who we have elected to guard our way of life. That's a big problem. You may not like the politics of Barack Hussein Obama. You may love the politics of Barack Hussein Obama. But if it comes to light, if it is made known that Barack Obama was a part of a scheme to besmirch, well, see, the thing is that everything that was done as an insurance policy in case that man won, in the unlikely event that Donald J. Trump won the presidency. Everything that was done in preparation of that. None of these things were brought to light before he won the presidency. So the idea would be, well, we're going to do all these things in case he becomes president so that we can unseat him and take power back and be the rulers once again and for a very long time. Their plan failed, and if it turns out that the President of the United States at the time was spearheading the operation, which George Papadopoulos alleges. Well, he doesn't really allege it. What he says is, that, listen, there's no way this could have happened without him. When you talk about getting nations involved, the nation of Italy, the nation of England, the United Kingdom, the nation of Australia, you're talking about, listen, these are nations that their survival depends on doing business with us, and vice versa. You don't risk that on a finger, right? You don't risk that. You don't risk the relationship with your business partner as a personal favor. No way. Promises have to be made. Large promises. Coordination to a level that I can't even imagine what would have to take place. For these nations to turn against, to interfere and participate in a lie to the degree that Mr. Papadopoulos is alleging, the only way that could happen is with the blessing of the leader of the free world. Because those actions are in and of themselves an act of war. If what George Papadopoulos is saying is not only A, true, and B, most importantly, brought to light, well, I guess they're equal in importance. If these things are brought to light, there is only one way to interpret these actions, and that is, these are the actions of an enemy. You know, if you run a business, or you know what, let me just simplify this even further. Like, I'm a married man. A lot of you are married, right? Got a wife, you got a husband, you got kids. You have a family. You have concerns. You have economic concerns, health concerns, spiritual concerns, community concerns. Right? You have a lot of concerns. And it all comes down to the preservation of your family. You want your wife to be happy. You want your children to have every opportunity afforded to them, and you want them to be strong enough to be able to recognize and seize opportunities when they present themselves. You have concerns. Somebody in your circle, maybe somebody from church, maybe somebody from your work, somebody in your bowling league, somebody that's close enough in your circle to where they're around your family. You find this person. You find out that this person has been going to your wife and saying horrible things about you. Things that are not true. Things, if somebody's going to your wife and saying, "Oh, you know what you need to do in light of all these things that I'm alleging? You need to leave him. Take half of his stuff. Orphan your own children. Remove the father from the house. Destroy your own life and the life of your children based on these lies that I'm telling you." Listen, if you add a little context to this little example I'm giving you, you'll find that this happens all the time. It happens all the time. It happens in churches. I've seen it many times. Many times. It happens everywhere. It happens in every social circle. There's just busybodies. They're bored and they want to feel powerful. Right? Well, that person who is going around slandering your name to your family and to your friends, those are the actions of an enemy. They represent an existential threat to you and to your children. If this person's, if these things that these people are saying are brought to fruition, and your wife takes action and divorces you and takes your kids, and then your kids are going to grow up without a father, and they're going to be distorted individuals, your life is going to be ruined, and your wife's life is going to be ruined. Everybody's going to spend the rest of their lives in bitterness, anger, and disappointment. So you need to look at that person who's spreading those rumors. You need to see that person as your enemy. There is no other way to see it. Yeah, that's a broken human being, and I'm moved with compassion. But ultimately, it's like, hey, listen, you're trying to kill everything that's good in my life. You're trying to murder my family. You are my enemy. Or some dude, spends a little bit too much attention every time he gets around your wife. That man is your enemy. Don't confuse yourself. He has but one agenda. That man is your enemy, and you need to see it that way. Right? Well, now take that example of the family and just see a nation as a family. We're one big, unhappy, disjointed family here in America. 300, not here, but 300 to 340 million American people living in America. And it turns out that the nation of Australia and the United Kingdom participated in something that they had hoped would destabilize our nation. They were hoping for it. Those are the actions of an enemy. Not only that, but these are politicians, mind you. Politicians, just like in America, are the same in the United Kingdom and in Australia and everywhere else in the world. Politicians do not have a mechanism where they self-reflect and say, hey, you know what, man, I was really, really wrong, and I am sorry, and we will never do that again. They don't have that mechanism. If this comes to light, If what George Papadopoulos is saying is true, and I believe it is, if what he's saying is true and is brought to light in our courts, it's going to have it's going to be a big splash, and there's going to be a lot of ripples in a very big lake. A lot of ripples. If all of a sudden the leader of the free world is looking at Australia and the United Kingdom with proof that they took the actions of an enemy, to the class of people who are unapologetic, who never say, I'm sorry, then the people of Australia and the people of the United Kingdom look to their politicians and say, are you kidding me? You tried to unseat, you participated in a scheme that would unseat the most powerful man in the world? For what? Why did you do this? What was in it for us? Why did you do this? The level of distrust and the ripples that this would cause, it goes down to the, you go inland into Australia. Everybody in Australia lives on the coast for the most part. But the ripples of this would go all the way into the mountains and the plains of Australia, where there's nothing but sheep herders and miners. And those people would be distrustful of their own government. Now, the UK looks like a bunch of liberals, but that's because all you ever see is people from London and Manchester. You're only seeing the liberals because they're in the cities and they get to be on TV. But the United Kingdom is full of people that are just go to work, go to church, mind their business, go bowling on Wednesdays type of folk. And if this turns out to be true, if it's brought to light, those people are going to have distrust, a whole new level of distrust for their own people. And I'm talking about like King Louis distrust. You know what I mean? Like off with their heads beat distrust. People descending on their halls of government type distrust. It goes further because it's like, well, if it turns out that the United Kingdom and Australia and Italy and anybody else who's brought to light did something to that degree, it's going to affect how other nations who want to do business with those countries, it's going to affect how that business transacts, because now all of a sudden you've got nations coming, going to the United Kingdom or going to Australia and saying, yeah, I'll tell you what, we're going to do business with you, but we're going to bend you over this barrel and have our way with you. You're not going to get hardly anything. You want to do business, you're going to earn pennies. Not the dollars that you would hope for, but pennies, because you're not trustworthy. You can sit there and think, oh, Pete, that's way over the top. I'm telling you, that's what brought down Japan. When people don't trust you, they stop doing business with you. Is it different in your life? Is it different in your community? Well, then why do you think it works differently on the world stage? It doesn't. It's the same thing. If you forfeit trust, you forfeit everything that goes along with it. Trust is politics, and dollars are economics. You lose the trust, you lose the dollars. Now, I want to talk to this guy. Hopefully I get him. I might not, though. George, I hope you come on. I would love to talk to you because I haven't read your book. I just saw the interview, and I want to know more. I'm on the other side of the planet right now from where you're at, so I can't really just go down to the bookstore and pick up your book. But in the meantime, I'm going to do everything I can to help you out. Everybody, all of you, go buy Deep State Target. Deep State Target. And if you just want the link to it, you can go on to Fleckus Talks. That's FLECCAS, Fleckus Talks. Watch the George Papadopoulos episode. The title of it is George Papadopoulos explains how he was illegally spied on by the Obama administration. And there's a link to his book on Amazon there. You must buy this book, dear listener. Go buy the book and watch the 48-minute interview with George Papadopoulos. What he's saying is bananas. Deeper than one of those novels that I was talking about earlier. It's bananas. And what's more is there's no hint that this guy's making anything up. All right? It looks like he knows what he's talking about. And you need to be prepared for what's coming. Because on top of George Papadopoulos, we've also got another guy out there named Tom Fitton. Does that name ring a bell? Tom Fitton is the president of Judicial Watch. Tom Fitton is I don't want to get way into it, but we have what's called the Freedom of Information Act. That means anything that's secret in our government, we have a right to see it. Unfortunately, though, it's not actually a right. If you want information, you have to sue the government to get it. And that's what Tom Fitton does for a living. He sues the government and he gets information. Naturally, if you have to sue the government to pry it from their hands, the information that is, and that information is by rights bad information. Not bad as in corrupt, but bad as in not good for us. Not good. No bueno. Right? He is extracting information from the government that they don't want anybody to know because it is embarrassing to the establishment. And they've grown very accustomed to their world of shadows and half-truths and profiting from war and all kinds of nasty stuff. Tom Fitton is the guy that sticks his bucket into the swamp. He lowers his bucket down to the swamp and he pulls up just the muck, the filth out of the swamp, and he pulls it up and he throws it on the floor and says, "See, America, this is what's going on." And God bless him. So the fact, Tom Fitton right now is on a crusade on this whole Mueller report and Russia collusion and Uranium One and the Steele dossier and that whole thing. So in tandem with what George Papadopoulos is saying and the fact that Tom Fitton is in there and the president of the United States is Donald Trump and William Barr is the Attorney General. Listen, we are about to go through a period of revelation. We're about to go through a period of massive unveiling. You remember at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark? Remember they pulled the top off of the Ark of the Covenant? Where the broken Ten Commandments were and where Aaron's staff was? What happened? It melted everybody's face off. We're about to go through a revealing. They're gonna pull the top off of the truth, and it's gonna melt everybody's face off. It's not going to be comfortable. It's going to be very hot. It's going to be very destabilizing. Be prepared. The reason I'm telling you got to go buy George Papadopoulos' book is so that you can see it coming. So that when it arrives, it's not a surprise to you, because it is going to surprise a lot of people. It's going to come as a big shock to the 8 people who still watch CNN and the Young Turks. It's going to be destabilizing. It's going to be very difficult. It's going to be much needed and very difficult. Be prepared. And also, I want to thank Troy. I'll just leave it at Troy. Troy, thanks for the money. If you want to support my show, as well as buying George Papadopoulos' book, which you should do first, but after you're done buying George Papadopoulos' book, please send me some money. You can do that at Subscribestar. Subscribestar.com/archadvocate. Subscribestar.com/archadvocate, and you could be a monthly subscriber. Or, if you just want to send me some cash. Cash money. Cash rules everything around me. Anybody? That's all right. If you want to send me some cash, you can do that on PayPal. PayPal.me/archadvocate. PayPal.me/archadvocate. And if none of that stuff works for you, just make sure you hit subscribe, would you? Would you please? Thank you very much, everybody, and I will talk to you tomorrow.